Hi. Well, we're a lot brighter and lighter today than we were in the last video. And I've turned the garbled sound off. I turned off my AC, so there's going to be that background noise like we had last time. So this video should be easier on the eyes and also easier to sit through and hear and deal with that way. And last time we talked a lot about surviving with a disease that's neglected by a lot of people and a lot of societies in the form of ME/CFS. We talked about surviving with that disease and the struggles that people who have it constantly have to deal with and are constantly struggling with. And even with a roof over one's head, it still presents tremendous issues. The only difference, particularly if one is alone with this illness and doesn't have someone supportive to help them, is going to be that they are safer out from the outside elements, but still the struggle to deal with the symptoms of ME/CFS remain, and those don't go away because there are four walls and a roof over one's head and a bed to sleep in. And so we're going to talk this time about survival as well, but a little bit different survival, survival of a different kind, one without a roof over one's head. As many of you know, I just recently came out of the wilderness of being homeless, and it was an extraordinary traumatic experience for me, and it was a very, very long and powerful struggle out there in the cold of winter in Wisconsin, trying to keep myself from freezing to death and stay alive with a major medical illness that most people probably would struggle to deal with if they had to step into my shoes for one day. So how did I do that? How did I get through that? How do I, with this incredibly severe illness that I keep complaining about in the videos, venting about, talking about all these symptoms and how much I struggle, how terrible it is, and etc. How did I survive a Wisconsin winter? Out in the cold, by myself, homeless. Well, first off, I had the help of some generous people who did actually send me occasional donations so that I could have enough money to be somewhat independent out there. I could eat on, many times eat on my own. I could buy things that I occasionally needed to stay warm or to help myself ambulate or keep myself from having to walk long distances, to help myself make life a little easier out there. And I was always trying to push myself and move myself in that direction every day. I'd get up and try to figure out, okay, how can I make this experience not only easier for me from an ME/CFS standpoint, but also from an emotional, social standpoint. And there are only so many things you can do in that situation anyway, even if you don't have a major disease or major issue with your physical functioning, to get along out there and to get around. And that's hard enough. But I was able to do some measure of things to help me comfort my experience. It wasn't, it wasn't a huge epiphany. I mean, there's just a point where you just hit a wall, and there's not much more you can do for yourself. But to make things shorter here, get to the point, the main reason why I actually was able to survive out there was not necessarily just because of the donations. In fact, the donations helped me sustain some form of physical and emotional, social comforts for me, or at least made my life better that way, and allowed me to get around and function better. However, it was actually my car, or the car that I just had, that actually, it literally saved my life out there. And the story being behind my car, how I ended up in it, is that when I first moved out of, when I first, after a year of battling various employment, money issues, etc., couldn't fend for myself anymore, couldn't work, couldn't keep myself afloat financially and pay my rent or my obligations, I decided that I needed to leave my apartment of 5 years where I was an authorized roommate. I never got on the lease because by the time I figured out that I had some stability, I fell ill, and I just didn't think it would be a good idea to trap myself there, and also I wasn't real sure about the roommate situation and how it would pan out for me, whether or not if I wanted to get up and leave at some point. Turns out I was always too ill to do that, so to move on my own. But then when I had to, I had my roommate assist me in moving the heavy stuff out to my car, and I moved a lot of the light things that I could carry under 5 pounds out to the car, and it was a very daunting, exhausting thing, even with the help that I got. But I got everything piled into the car, and I went to homeless shelter in town here, and the hope was that homeless shelter would be able to sustain my needs, including my need for a sleep apnea machine. Give me a place where I could plug that machine in, and I could lay down and sleep at night and recover as normally as possible and get enough sleep that I could maintain some functioning out there, a good enough functioning without having to fall completely back and falling into not being able to move at all, which would have been absolutely the end of my ability to even fend for myself. And it would have been a major disaster with the lack of understanding there is out there in regard to what I have and what I deal with. So I ended up going to the shelter. The shelter, after 3 days, I was sleeping in the kitchen where they put the medical cases, quote unquote. People need to have machines plugged in, like mine, on a hard mat with no pillow, because they were afraid of bed bugs, and they wouldn't deal with me getting an internal pillow that I could just put in the dryer to make sure that it stayed in the house, in one of the bins. They wouldn't do it. I had a letter from my physician that stated that not a physician, it was my sleep doctor, stating that I should, that they needed to do this because I needed to have a comfortable place to sleep. I needed to have a pillow. I needed it for my neck pain, and I needed to have some place where I could plug that machine in, and I wasn't far away from the door, so I didn't have to walk 30 feet every time I needed to go to the bathroom at night. But they wouldn't accommodate me. In fact, it was that bad. It was very bad. I had a powwow with the director, and she refused to honor the recommendation from my sleep apnea doctor, and I walked out, because I wasn't going to put up with this anymore. My sleep had suffered so badly after all the stuff that I did and all the physical duress that I underwent to get out of my house. Then I was not even sleeping well in this crap hole of a place, and I was waking up every day, and I was less and less healthy. I was less and less. I was my CFS symptoms were increasing, and I found myself at the library laying down 3-4 hours a day because I wasn't getting enough sleep. So I ended up, even after going to the local homeless advocacy group here in town, and it's a homeless casework. It's a homeless case worker operation where they try to find housing for people, but the only housing that was available was this homeless shelter. My caseworker there actually went to the director and talked to her the day after this happened, and she still refused, even after he talked to her. So this is how bad it was. I ended up in my car, and it was middle September, and I was basically staring down the barrel of a gun, as I would put it. Looking at, with no money, no support, nobody there with me, nobody to help me, sleeping in a car the entire Wisconsin winter until I could find some place to move in. Somehow I could better my condition, or somehow I would be able to get through this and come out the other end. So the car had no lights on the back. The brake lights, tail lights were gone because the fuse box had rotted and rusted out because the previous owners had let the car sit in the rain and the snow for how many years, whatever, and everything rotted out, and I could never pay for a fuse box before I became homeless. I never had that ability because of all of my issues, concerns, financial issues, or whatever else. And then it also had other things internally wrong with it. Tires were going, the bottom was rusting out, and there were just things. Suspension was bad. The car was never going to last that much longer, but my hope would be that the car would last long enough to get me through until I could find something to get me out of the other side. Whether it be disability or something else would deliver me something. I'd find some other kind of assistance. So the car actually became my lifeline because as I went through the winter and I went moving to various parts of town, being kicked out of this place and that place because they didn't want a homeless person sitting around and shall we say, kicking their feet up there for the entire winter. I think they're a bunch of cowards, but that's my opinion. I think I have a good reason for it too, but that's another video. And so I eventually ended up in the Walmart parking lot. And that's because, and it's no secret to people who are ever been homeless in any various city or town that has a Walmart. Walmart is pretty much one of the few store chains out there that actually allow homeless people and campers to stay overnight in their parking lots. So by virtue of just default, I ended up at Walmart and having to sleep in the parking lot every night there. By the time I got to that point, it was early winter and it was freezing cold. And at any rate, having said all of this, had I not had the car, then I would not have survived the winter. And you maybe, if you still with me, if you've gotten this far with me in the video, you may be thinking, well, why does he say that? Why is he? Why can you come up with that conclusion? How do you know? Well, because I could already not get around as it is. I could barely walk 100, 200 feet at a time. And then you had the snow and the ice and below zero, freezing cold, etc. And the car allowed me to get around town, to get to places I needed to go to the convenience store, to go to the bathroom, to go to the mall to stay warm, to park in front of Walmart and get dressed and use their bathroom and clean up and look presentable and and at least maintain some semblance that I had that I had some autonomy. But the autonomy, of course, is completely second to the issue of my own physical health and well-being, which was being preserved by the vehicle. The car, as went through the winter, of course, things got worse and worse. The rust caught up with it. The suspension on the rear driver's side suspension tower rusted out, and the wheel broke. The axle broke, basically. The what was suspending the wheel from the tire from the wheel axle, and what was keeping the wheel connected to the car, the control arm broke off. And once that happened, the car became undrivable, and I was basically stranded in the Walmart parking lot for several weeks, until I got this apartment by virtue of a new medical practitioner who fortunately listened to what I had to say and was willing to help me get off the street. But I owe that car a debt of gratitude, because without that car I would have been hopelessly frozen out in the street. I mean, probably laying on some street corner, wrapped up in some, a couple of quilts I couldn't even carry, and trying to sleep in the snow or somewhere under a bridge, and that wouldn't have worked for me. That I would have physically I would have been stranded, and I would have been I would just be sitting in one spot, unable to go to eat, go to the bathroom, keep warm. That car is gone now, so I had to get rid of it because it wasn't drivable. I had it towed over to my new place here, and then I had it scrapped about 2 months ago. And with the price of steel being so low, I only got $30 for it. That $30 is long gone. But it leaves me with the difficulties that you're seeing me get around on the bus and etc., getting around town, because of the fact that I don't have that car. So, in case any of you were wondering, well, how does this guy miraculously get through a winter in Wisconsin, and has all these terrible symptoms that he's just can't get anywhere, do anything, and he's got this horrible disease. How can he possibly get through all that? Well, that's how I did it. And of course, is it fortunate? Well, yeah, but I already had the vehicle. I mean, when I went out there and moved my stuff into that car, my plan was best case scenario was to survive at a homeless shelter, and then the car helped me get around anyway. But when the homeless shelter fell through, that car was my lifesaver. It was already there as a backup, fallback plan. And fortunately, I actually slept very well in the front seat of the car, and during the coldest parts of the winter, I was able to wrap a couple of large quilts around me. I had the money and donations I got. I was able to buy a warm jacket. I was able to wrap myself up, and I'd run the car a few times a night to keep it warm. And fortunately, I could run it over to Walmart to use the bathroom. So I had all that figured out once things fell apart, but it was never, oh, well, I'm going to use the car now, and this is great. Fortunately, I have this car. It was never like that. It was always by white knuckle, fly by the seat of my pants kind of thing. Just trying to figure out the best, most sufficient way to survive being out there, and realizing that the car was my asset. And unfortunately, the car is no longer an asset. I replaced that with having a roof over my head at this point in time. But the struggles still remain. And where I traded the roof over my head, I now have lost the mobility of being able to get in the car and drive around and do more of what I could do or want to do as a person with ME/CFS. I'm now sort of, I don't want to say trapped in my apartment, but more or less I don't get out 80% of the time because I have to save up my energy. As you've seen with all the bus videos, I have to save up my energy and plan around going out to do things, run errands, etc., and try to step my way around dealing with getting out of here and only doing important things. And of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of things that we can do are diminished, but my basic survival things that I need to do are a struggle enough because now I no longer have the car. So that's going to be something that in the future I hope I can get back, but for now it's going to be a while before I can figure out exactly what to do to get it back, and in the meantime deal with things as they are now.